you're right that there is a truth claim aspect to religion, but I do think, honestly, that in the life of the world, that has always been a secondary thing to the participative reality of religion. What I mean is that even the truth claims, the reason why we find the truth claims important is because of what they offer downstream. It's not just like I just have these arbitrary truth claims. I believe in certain things because they offer a world in which I exist, and that world has characteristics. And so the Christian story, for example, of the teaching of Jesus, the death and the resurrection, the cross, becomes a model for being. And then it becomes the structure of our world. It structures our perception, it structures our morality, it structures our ethics, it structures what we care about. It does all of that downstream from the truth claim, right? So you could have all kinds of arbitrary truth claims. You could say, well, I have a truth claim, which is that Jesus's sandals, were 1 inch thick. And it's like, well, what? Who cares? That doesn't mean anything. It has no reason. But if I say I have a truth claim, which is Jesus died and resurrected from the dead, it's because it offers a world that is different from if that wasn't the case. This is Jonathan Peugeot. Welcome to the Symbolic World. All right, and so everyone, I am very happy to be here with Peter Boghossian. All of you will know him, if you're kind of in the conversation of meaning and of, the problem of woke culture and how to react to it and how to kind of save our Western society. He's now affiliated with the University of Austin, and we met in London last year. It wasn't during ARC, like it was around, I think, no, it wasn't during ARC, it was before.
Before, yeah.
We had a bit of a conversation about religion, and we both were very critical of a lot of the postmodern stuff because of how religious it is. And the surprise in the discussion with Peter was wondering, well, if you think that, why then do you like religion? And so, or why do you not critical against religion itself? And so we thought it would be a great opportunity to continue the conversation. So Peter, thanks for coming on.
Thanks, Jonathan. Thanks for having me. I think we met at an Unheard event, didn't we?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. It was, I forget. It's actually the showing of your documentary, about
Mike Nana's documentary. Yeah.
About the whole paper, all the papers that you wrote with Lindsay, and
yeah.
It was a great documentary. It was really fun.
The Reformers. Yeah, Mike did a great job. And then in that conversation, let's see, we were both kvetching about the new religion and the architecture of the new religion. And I think I said to you, well, if you realize that's a problem, why don't you realize that your religion is a problem? And the question is a version. It has as I told you, it has an older pedigree in the literature, but it's a version of John W. Loftus's outsider test for faith. And the idea is that you want to look at your religion as an outsider, as you and I are outsiders to these religions, as a Muslim is an outsider to, Pentecostalism, and they see speaking in tongues as silly. I gave a talk about this years ago, Jesus, the Easter Bunny, and other delusions, just say no. By the way, at that talk, the original title of that talk was supposed to be Jesus, Muhammad, and other delusions. Jesus, Muhammad, the Easter Bunny, and other delusions, just say no. But the university made me take out Muhammad, but it was fine to keep Jesus in there.
Yeah, of course. We all know that's the case. Everybody pretends to be open about Islam, but is really just scared, is what it is.
Yeah.
And so I think that the importance, like the first thing to talk about is to see also, when I talk about religion, I think we're in some ways at the outset, we're thinking about it a little differently. Like, for you, it seems religion is like things that you believe, let's say, that are often somewhat extraordinary, that kind of, that constitute the group. I see religion at the outset as, like the word implies, as the thing that binds us, right? And so, for me, religion is an extension of many other aspects. So religion isn't like a freak thing that exists completely on its own. but it's an extension of binding. And so it's an extension of the manner in which we recognize that multiplicity joins into unity. So if you have a nation, you need a way for you to know that you're a nation and not just a bunch of strangers. There's something, not just know, but participate, right? It's not just like a mental knowledge. You have to have ways to know and participate in the fact that you exist as one. And that will, even in terms of nation, will end up looking like what we tend to think religion is, right? You'll have Washington, D.C. with monuments that remember the people that founded it. People will go on pilgrimages. They'll go see these monuments to like participate and remember. We'll have parades. We'll have pledges. We'll have a flag and songs. All these things that are there to help us know and celebrate in the unity we participate in. And so I see that scaling at every level of participation, from the the person, first of all, then the family, then communities, cities, churches, clubs, basketball, teams, sports teams. They all have a way in which we need to know how to be together. And so that's why the ritual of a church, to me, is the highest level, because it tries to bind us into the highest thing. It tries to bind us in the highest thing we can imagine. But a sports team will look religious too. It'll have a mascot. We'll have uniforms. We'll have songs and ways to know that this is our team and we're kind of rooting for it. And so that's, to me, maybe that's the big difference at the outset, which is why, just to finish on this, which is why when I look at the woke thing, I can see that it's religious, because it's a mode of binding that has celebration, ritual, that has all of those things, but it is perverse, right? Because you can have manners of binding that are perverse, right? You can have a street gang. The street gang will have rituals, will have initiation, will have a name, costumes, all of that, but it leads you towards something that is actually dangerous for the other, for the other beings that exist in the world.
Yeah, I guess I'm not buying the thing that binds us. And the reason I'm not buying that is that I think that it either doesn't capture the nuance or it's missing something fundamental, in that when I think about religion, I think about the reference to, it has truth claims. Sports teams don't have truth claims. And so if you recognize the truth, or not you, if one recognizes the truth claims of other religions as silly, and one recognizes the trappings behind that, then it's unclear to me why, if one is reasoning honestly, why would one recognize the truth claims of one's own religion as, I don't know, not epistemically sound?
Mm-hmm. So
I guess I'm not buying the binding thing, because there has to be, like Hannah Arendt talks about how to have an ideology means you must believe it's true, right? I mean, there's a truth component to that, in which there's not to a sports team. You adjudicate those, like, I know nothing about sports, but
no, there is a truth claim that in sports. What I mean, it's a little different, but you have to accept the identity and the rules of the sport. You actually have to accept those as being true relative to the sport. They're not true in an absolute sense, but they're true relative to the sport. Right. And
those are conventions. Those are everybody knows that those are arbitrary conventions, and I wish I knew more about sports. I could, give a soccer. Or
but they're not completely arbitrary conventions. They have a pattern.
No, I mean, you can't bring a chainsaw into a boxing match, right? So, but those rules.
Also, you wouldn't make a sport of someone. I don't know, someone like rubbing the side of a table for 2 hours. Like, there are certain things that capture human attention that are objective, and that you can't actually. There's a scale of relevance in sport, but all sports have aspects in common which make them sport that are true. Like, if not, then you don't care about them, right? Like I said, you can make a sport out of something completely ridiculous that nobody would actually love, but if you make a sport that has the right amount of excellence and competition, there's a way to know who's winning. There's all of these things that are necessary for a sport to exist. So there's variability, but there's still there's a boundary to variability. So you could say the same.
Right. Yeah.
So let's say you could say, so I'm a Christian. I want to be careful not to like freak people out. Like, I am very much a Christian.
What are they going to be freaked out about?
No, because I'm going to say something that might freak out some of the Christians. Is to say that in order to bind yourself at the highest level, right, the way that unites the most elements together, there's a certain amount of variability which is possible, but that amount of variability is limited to the fact that we're binding ourselves to the highest thing. So, like you said, binding yourself to a sport and binding yourself to the infinite source of all things that gives you a mode of being that encompasses all other modes of being, which is what religion tends to do, because it offers identity, it offers morality, it offers ways to come together in marriage, in death, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It also has a type of variability. So, like, a good example would be the flying spaghetti monster. Like, the flying spaghetti monster is actually an impossible religion. Like, technically, it's an impossible religion because it doesn't have the characteristics necessary to bind you to something real. But Islam is sufficiently, like, although I disagree with some of the tenets of Islam, it's sufficiently structured so that it can do that. And if someone said, oh, we'll replace it with the flying spaghetti monster, then it wouldn't exist as a religion.
Okay, so there's a lot going on in this conversation. So I suggest before we go down or explore other topics, we need to disambiguate some terms, talk about some things. So Wittgenstein talks about what you're talking about in terms of the commonalities among sports and calls them family resemblances. So there are resemblances. You could have I don't know if you could have a sport for rubbing a table. I guess you could have a sport for anything you wanted to. And you have ways to adjudicate, you have conventions, but the difference with religion is you're not making truth claims. I mean, you're saying that we agree if you get again, I'm just making this up. If you kick the ball through this net or whatever, you throw the ball in this net at a certain number of feet, you get 2 points, and then I can't remember what it is. I think it's 3 points in basketball. Who the hell? I have literally no idea.
It's no big deal.
Okay, so something like that. But we're talking about specific things. We're talking about linguistic propositions, so sentences in which communities agree that belief in those is fundamentally constitutive of what it means to belong in the community. For example, there being an historical Jesus. Now, I know some people who consider themselves Christians who don't accept the historicity of Jesus. I mean, I couldn't care less how people self-identify. I mean, I really, in that sense, so it's not a moral question or even a political question. It's in the broader sense. I think if you were to ask the overwhelming majority of Christians, they would say to you, yes, you have to accept that Jesus died for your sins and he was, crucified, etc., which basically Muslims don't believe. I don't know, many Christians don't believe that. They don't know that Muslims don't believe Jesus was crucified, but that's just parenthetical. So the difference is the things that bind us. Lots of things bind us. You can cook a meal and bind us, but that's very different from a truth claim.
Right. So you're right that there is a truth claim aspect to religion, but I do think honestly that in the life of the world, that has always been a secondary thing to the participative reality of religion, which is, what I mean is that even the reason why we find the truth claims important is because of what they offer downstream, right? So there's a downstream thing in the truth claim. So it's not just like I just have these arbitrary truth claims. I believe in certain things because they offer a world in which I exist, and that world has characteristics. And so the Christian story, for example, of the teaching of Jesus, the death and the resurrection, the cross, becomes a model for being. And then it becomes the structure of our world. It structures our perception, it structures our morality, it structures our ethics, it structures what we care about. It does all of that downstream from the truth claim, right? And so I understand. So so you could have all kinds of arbitrary truth claims. You could say, well, I have a truth claim, which is that Jesus's sandals, were 1 inch thick. And it's like, well, what? Who cares? That doesn't mean anything. It has no reason. But if I say I have a truth claim, which is Jesus died and resurrected from the dead, it's because it offers a world that is different from if that wasn't the case. And that world happens in, like I said, in participation. So you go to church. The church is at the middle of the town. It's the highest building. Everybody can see the steeple of the church with the cross above it. And then they all gather there together to manifest their unity. They celebrate the things that brings them together: birth, death, marriages. All of these things happen in light of that, of what the truth claim offers. And so I think a simple example is that, let's say in most societies before Christianity, there was no need to say I do. There was absolutely no need to. It's like, you're getting married. It was decided for you. You bring the people there, and the woman had absolutely no say in what, like in the marriage. It's like a man takes a wife, and some guy they decide that that's her, and they come together and they get married. And there was no need to ask for the willing acceptance of that responsibility of the people. Now, Christianity comes, offers the cross as an example. And now in that frame of willing self-sacrifice, the husband and the wife now in a Christian marriage have to say that they are willing to take this other person as their husband or as their bride. So it's a little example, but what I mean is that the truth claim it offers a world in which to live, and that's the most important, because, like I said, who cares about truth claims? Like, there are all millions of truth claims I could have that don't offer me anything.
So I wrote down what you said. So the truth claim is important because of what it offers.
Yeah.
So you're talking about the consequences of the truth claim.
The reason why that truth claim is important, not whether it's true or not, that's another question. But the reason why a certain truth claim is important is because of what it offers, right? Like I said, there are millions of truth claims I can make, but there's one truth claim that will, I don't know, like, that will offer me something, right? The truth claim about how to make, how to make a certain type of medicine is more important than the truth claim that there's like a half an inch piece of rubber that fell on the ground next to me. That's also a truth claim, but it doesn't offer me anything. And so I don't have to posit it in an important place. I don't have to lift it up as above others in that way.
So I'm trying not to import any new words into the conversation. So you're saying that one should, and I want to relate this back to the idea of binding to make sure I understand. You're saying that there are certain truth claims which yield greater binding. Well, let me stop there. Is that right?
Well, that's necessary. Like, in terms of care, first of all, in terms of care, just as a person, in terms of attention, certain truth claims necessarily bring about more binding because there are things you care about more than others. There's a hierarchy of care in a person, in a community, or whatever. And so the truth claims of a community are binding in care, right? So, that's why we elevate the founding of a nation, because that founding of that nation is the reason why we exist as a nation. We don't talk about what George Washington ate for breakfast.
So if a truth claim, so again, I'm repeating this only back to you only because I want to make sure I understand. So it's important because of what it offers, and the thing that it offers you, would you believe it even if it didn't offer you anything? Should you believe it if it offers you nothing?
Well, I wouldn't care about it. It's not that it wouldn't believe.
Well, I'm thinking about.
I wouldn't care about it. If you told me, hey, Jonathan, there's a piece of rubber on the ground in Syria on the corner of these two streets, I would say, oh, I'm going to forget that now. Right? I'm gonna forget that now because
Right. Well, I guess I'm thinking about a lot of things that are populating my head in the conversation. I'm thinking about this idea of Islam, of submission, and submitting because it's true, independent of its benefit for you, independent of paradise afterward. There's just submission because that's the will of God. And so I'm not contesting or repudiating any concept of benefit as like.
But it's an interesting. First of all, it's like it's actually an interesting question because in Islam we don't say God is love. In Christianity we say God is love, and how can I say this? Like that might even afford me the possibility of understanding the hierarchy of goods that present themselves to me in a different way that a Muslim will be able to understand, and that will offer a world to me, and that world has a shape, and we can compare worlds, right? We can compare the world of someone who believes, for example, in Zeus, let's say, and what that world looks like, and the world of someone who believes in the monotheistic God, or the God of the Bible, let's say, or et cetera, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
you can also have a world where someone, for example, believes only in reason, and you can see what that world affords because we have an example of it. Like we have the Enlightenment, and we have what that gave, and we can see what that does, and that's part of this. So it's like there are truth claims that are different than other truth claims in that sense, especially about the highest aspect, because it's an anchor.
Hmm. Would you believe something if are you comfortable with all of your Christian beliefs?
Am I comfortable with all of my Christian beliefs? That's an interesting one. I would say, like most people, there is a hierarchy of comfort with the hierarchy of Christian beliefs. Maybe that's a good way to understand it. It's like, because the purpose, like I said, what's in, one of the reasons why I'm saying this is that the way that we live in the world is about trust and about where to go mostly, and less about truth claims, right? I believe there's nothing. I think truth claims are important. Like I think that they're part of this. But so there are things about Christianity which I see as being absolutely necessary and absolutely world giving, and so I do believe them. But as you go down the list of what all kinds of Christians believe, there's certain things which seem either irrelevant to me or kind of shady. And then I'm like, either I think it's not interesting, or I don't believe it, or I'm like, well, just whatever. And then maybe one day I'll have more confidence on this or that. But it doesn't matter that much because, like I said, I don't think most of our lives are about making sure our truth claims are accurate. Most of our life is about knowing where to go and what to do and how to be. That's the thing that's mostly important. And I want to be careful. I'm not saying that truth claims aren't important and that making sure things are accurate isn't important, but it's downstream from the other. Because the one of how to be, where to go, where to look, how to exist, it makes you care about certain truth claims and not care about others. And so the truth claims are downstream from the direction, you could say.
Would you follow a path if it had the binding element to it and you thought it made your life better, but it wasn't true?
Well, it depends if I could know that it wasn't factually true.
Yeah.
Right. That's more complicated because even the factually true to me is complicated. It's a little complicated because there are different levels of factuality. And so the question is always, what level of factuality is necessary for you to believe something is true? And there are certain, and what I mean is that there are forensic descriptions to a police officer, right? And so it's like, here's a fact sheet of all the things that happen at a crime scene, and it's like all super detailed and it's whatever, right? And then there's the I think my wife loves me. That I think my wife loves me is a truth claim, but I don't have the forensic, I can't access the forensic.
Better, my wife loves me, because you would be inerring if you said, I think my wife loves me.
Yeah. What do you
Yeah.
mean? Sorry.
Well, no, the
I would say
claim
I trust
my wife loves me, as opposed to I think my wife loves me.
I would say maybe something like I trust my wife loves me. How about that?
Well, no, because your feeling of trust, you'd be infallible with that.
Well, trust would be that there's a sufficient amount of stickiness between, let's say, my trust and the facts at the
Yeah,
level
so
that
you can just
matters.
eliminate the my trust or I think my wife loves
My
me.
wife loves me. Yeah, but I could be proven. There could be a moment where things happen and then I don't. That is definitely possible. So I think that that's the case for.
Oh, so can I ask you a personal question?
Yeah.
Are you monogamous?
Yes.
Okay, so if you found out that your wife was cheating on you with multiple men and women and going to these crazy orgies, would you want to know that that's true?
Yes, I
If
would. Definitely. And it would also cast a dispersion on the idea that she loves me, and it would be good reason to divorce her.
okay, so you want to know things that are true, even if the consequences of those things are negative to your own life.
Well, of course. I mean, I think that's right. But it's always about the level, right? It's always about the level of truth. So someone could come and like exactly like someone could come and tell me some rumor, right? It's like, oh, oh, someone told me that they saw your wife talking to this guy, and that guy's really a player. So you should be really worried, Jonathan, about your wife. And then, right?
What
So
people tell you is so benign. Like
yeah,
what
exactly. But what I
conjured in
mean is,
your imagination was just so different from what my imagination would have
okay,
conjured.
well, whatever. What I mean is that there could be a rumor, there could be things that if I didn't trust her,
Right.
lead me to doubt that she is faithful to me and that she loves me. But I'm careful to make sure that the barrier is sufficient, right? In order to break that, because you can always go into like micro details and find reasons to disprove something, especially if it's trust. Like, man, trust is something
Yeah.
that needs a kind of
And,
directionality to it.
and the reason that you and I realize I have to be incredibly careful and precise with each word. So if this is not just accurate but precise, let me know. The reason that you believe the main propositions of your religion is because you think that they're true.
It's it's first of all because I believe what they afford. And then secondly, that I believe and I trust that. And secondly, that I believe that they're true. And it's the same with my wife, by the way, which is the reason why I think my wife loves me is not because it's true, it's because it's important. And then secondly, it's true. Because if it wasn't important, I wouldn't care about it. You wouldn't have to ask me. You wouldn't even have to ask me that whether or not. And so it's the same with faith. Like,
But if it wasn't true, it would be irrelevant what it afforded you. Or would it? I don't know. I'm asking.
no, it would obviously if it becomes untrue, like untrue in the sense of that there's a disjunct between the trust and the factuality of things, that the factuality of things are disconnected from what I trust, then obviously then that would break. Like it would break. It was like it's like a
That
separate
assumes you'd know it.
that I would find that out, let's say. Yeah, that I would find out that my wife is cheating on me, let's say.
Yeah.
Then that would break the link.
So it would seem to me, and I think I'm misunderstanding you because I don't see how this could be true. Let me rephrase that. I don't see how this could be the case. Wouldn't it have to be like you would have to believe that they're true, and then other things would come downstream of that, the benefits, because of what it offers.
The benefits come first. They come before the true.
So
Because
the benefits are what leads
there are
you to
millions
believe
of
is
things that
true.
are true, Peter, that I don't care about. There's like an indefinite amount of things that are true that I don't
Yeah,
care
me
about
too.
because they don't
Yeah.
offer me a world. But there are certain things that do offer me a possibility, and those are the ones I care about. So the value comes first, right? And then the truth of it comes second. Because think about it, like if I found out that my wife is cheating on me, and now I hate life. Now I'm mad. I'm sad. Everything falls apart because the value that that it offered me was the reason why I cared for it to be true in the first place. I
Uh,
still want it to be true, right? because
we gotta introduce you to the idea of compersion at some point, but that's a conversation for another day. So, okay, so I'm still trying to make my wrap my head around this. So, are you saying that the benefits of what you get lead you to believe it's true?
No, I'm not saying that.
Oh, okay.
What I'm saying is that the benefit of what it offers makes you see the value of it.
Okay, that I can see. Yeah, totally.
And then it makes you see why you should care.
Okay, that I got that.
Right.
That's
And why
linear. I got that
you should
chain.
participate in that.
Okay, I got that.
Okay. All right. And then, okay, let me give you.
But keep going with the string because I'm following you now.
And so then there are certain elements of that have to do with what you would call factuality at different levels. And then those have to connect. Like there has to be a certain amount of connection with factuality, of course.
And the connection there, is this a kind of, I don't mean it pejoratively, but a god of the gaps? It's like, is this that gap keeps getting smaller and smaller so that at some level the factual accordance means that the activity is tethered to reality and that it's true?
It's true. Okay, so let's there's this, how can I say this? Like there's a scale that you need in order to know that you want to engage, that you want to participate in it. That's what I'm seeing. It's what's important to understand, that it's about participation. So so I trust that the sidewalk near my house is going to hold me up, right? I trust that. And I don't think about it. I actually never think about it. I just walk on the sidewalk, right? But it is possible that something could happen,
sure,
that would force me to question that. And the thing is that there's actually a scale of that, and some people will be triggered really fast about the trust of the sidewalk, and some people will be triggered too late, and then it'll collapse and they'll fall into the hole. And so the person that is triggered really fast, they'll be afraid, they'll be super cautious, they'll be really careful, and maybe most of the time they're avoiding something which is not a problem at all. And the person that, so there's a scale. So this is the same thing with the religious thing, like in the sense that, if you're an American, right, and you think it's good to be an American because you trust the foundation of America, then people, what they're going to do, and they do now, is they're going to start to say, well, what about this? What about Thomas Jefferson's sins? What about Thomas Jefferson's slavery? What about this? And some people will say, well, if Thomas Jefferson had slaves, therefore America invalidate, right? And other people will say, well, no, I need, I would need to know that, like, someone, I don't know, like that the very principles of the whole thing are completely erroneous in order for me to abandon my allegiance to America. But all of that is like, and so it's the same with religion. So someone will say, do you believe in the truth of the resurrection? And the truth is, I would say yes. And then someone would say, but what if I could show you that resurrection is impossible? And it's like, okay, can you do that? Like, can you show me that resurrection is impossible? And what does that even mean? Like, I'm not sure what are you talking about?
I think that's really interesting. So let's follow with that. That's a really good point, and I hear you. So let's follow that up. So instead of someone saying to you, I can show you that resurrection is false, let's say that, I don't know, some archaeologist went on some dig somewhere and they found this ancient library. And in this ancient library were nearly perfectly preserved scrolls that were like, haha, we perpetrated a great hoax. We, whatever that Jesus didn't resurrect.
So what if,
I mean, would you still believe then?
Okay, so what if someone in 500 years went back into our old internet archive and was able to get into 4chan and discovered that there are like insider CIA people that are saying that we're run by lizard people.
Okay.
And that they have a whole account of it, like 500-page books about how we're run by lizard people.
All right. So I see, I understand you and I hear you. And I think that that's your, and if I'm out of, if this is, if this is too harsh, let me know.
No,
I,
go for it.
I think you're looking for a reason to maintain the belief.
You think, well, yeah, because of what it affords me, of course. Well,
Okay.
no,
So,
I'm not. I'm looking not looking for a reason to maintain my belief. I'm suspicious of people who try to take it away from me. First of all, I'm suspicious about their intentions. Just like the guy who comes to me and says, I saw your wife talking to this guy. It's like I'm suspicious about your intentions. Like, what is it you're hoping to accomplish by casting this doubt on me? uh that's the thing. And so it's not that I'm looking for reason to maintain belief, because when I'm walking on the sidewalk, I'm not looking for reason to maintain belief. But if someone, like, if someone's trying to cast doubt on, if a crazy guy comes up to me and says the sidewalk is made of jello, the sidewalk is made of jello, and then I'm gonna be like, well, sorry, I
yeah,
chose the sidewalk, not you.
yeah, that's because you have no reason to. But if you were walking down the street on the sidewalk and a couple of people just vanished, like they sunk into the sidewalk, it turned into some like sci-fi super
Then
quick.
I would definitely not speak. I would
Yeah,
definitely not walk
and
on
that
the
would be
sidewalk.
a very reasonable, rational, rational thing to do. So, but in these instances,
So let me give you an example today. Like,
okay,
I'll give you an
sure.
example today, right? It's like there are people that fake miracles all the time. The people that lie about miracles, there are people that lie about healing, there are people that lie about all kinds of stuff. And every time I hear a story of someone getting healed or some miracle or whatever, like, I'm like, well, I don't know. I don't necessarily have an opinion on it. And
Really,
it doesn't mean that I don't believe that miracles are possible or that healing is
that's
possible.
fascinating to me. So why should, on a scale from 1 to 10, so if 1 is no way, Jose, 5 is maybe, 10 is absolutely, why should your default be 5? Your default should be like 1.1.
What do you mean default should be 1 for 1? That I should immediately believe people's claims?
No, no. So if we have a scale
Yeah.
with 1 being this is BS, 5 being maybe it's possible, 10 being this is absolutely true. If someone tells you about some miracle they've seen, I don't understand why you're defaulting to 5 instead of defaulting to 2.
So
Like
well,
why is your default maybe? My default would be 1.0. Like if the scale is 0 to 10, it'd be like 0.1111. But I would still be doxastically open. I'd be
yeah.
open to that given sufficient evidence. But why would your default be 5? Why would you say maybe?
Well, because I've experienced miracles, because I've seen it. Like, I've seen people have someone pray for them, and then they go to the doctor and the cancer's gone. Like, a few
How do
days
you
later.
know that's causal?
It
People
doesn't
spontaneously remit from things all the time.
that's it's not how do you okay, how do you establish causality between meaning and events?
Evidence.
There's no way to establish causality between meaning and events.
Well, there actually is. The Harvard prayer study, for example, was has the largest N. I can't remember. It's like someone will look it up, but like 1,600 or 1,800 something people, in which they had double blind placebo control groups about people praying for other people. And then after I think cardiac events, and then they looked at that, and there was no statistically significant difference. In fact, the people who got prayed for actually did it slightly worse off. But like you can just invoke the tools of science to figure that out. If praying for someone caused cancer to go away, I mean, we've studied it, and it's just not true.
Yeah. Well, I don't, how can I say this? I I really struggle to see how you could study that. And the reason is because
It's
prayer is
actually
not
easy to study.
prayer is not a mechanical process that you just you just put two people in a box and say, okay,
No,
you pray for him,
no, that's
you don't
100%
pray,
right.
you pretend,
No, you're right.
put a wall between you, like you pray in secret, and then you try to
No,
test
no, you're right.
results of that. It's as if you said,
Right.
you know, Anyways, I just find
You're
it, I
right.
just find
No,
it
no,
funny.
you're absolutely correct. That's
It's
why
like
it's
if you,
essential that you have a rigorous methodology. You get people who actually believe. I think they, if memory serves me correctly, they recruited from Catholic churches, among other churches. But you get people who genuinely believe, who are churchgoers. You get a large N, in other words, a large number of people in the sample. You
so
find
you don't believe at all that prayer can help someone recover. Do you believe in the placebo
you mean
effect?
intercessory prayer?
Like, do you believe in the placebo effect?
Wait a second. You mean intercessory prayer?
Yeah, like someone praying for someone else that it could help them heal.
No, I think it's total nonsense. It's absolute nonsense. It's complete and utter nonsense.
Do you? I mean, do you think? Do you think that? Do you think the placebo? But do you think the placebo effect is? Do you think a placebo effect is real?
You wouldn't get the placebo effect with intercessory prayer. You'd get the placebo effect with people praying for themselves.
Okay.
You may get the placebo effect
If you trust your doctor, does the placebo effect have more effect on you than if you don't?
Hold on, let me finish the thought. You may get the placebo effect if people in your immediate circle were around you praying for you and you had that. But
Yeah.
there is no placebo effect if you find people who are genuine believers. You show them pictures, you introduce them to this person, and they go off and they pray. Then there's no contagion there.
Okay. So what do you think the placebo effect is?
Well, that's another question from. We have data on this, and it doesn't work.
The
So
placebo effect doesn't work.
no, intercessory prayer. So then my question to you becomes my same question as I asked you before, which is, about going back. We find some scrolls. So I've given you another example. So you said you've seen miracle in your life and someone prayed for, and I asked you how it's causal. So I've given you another reason to at least pause or have doubt, and that has given you no doubt. And so my comment to you would be, it seems to me, I like you, you're a nice guy, I think we get along very well. And it seems to me that you're looking for a reason to hold the belief. Like those reasonable, like if you looked at that from any other proposition I gave you, like people would say, okay, well, maybe that gives me a reason to doubt. Maybe I should be more epistemically questioning of these things.
I mean, how can I say this? I definitely have doubts when I hear certain stories about people healing miraculously. Like, I definitely do have doubts about that. But I also see the manner in which meaning and a connection to meaning does have an effect on health. Like, and that I see it all the time.
Yeah, that's different. That's different from an objective claim of someone praying for someone else and then them spontaneously remitting from some cancer or something. That's a different claim.
It's not a completely different claim because it's related to the way in which things like speech, things like care, things like attention are related to healing, right? So they're not disconnected. Like, the human being finds healing in connection to meaning, right? Maybe that's a good way to think about it. And that it is possible.
Viveki talks about that.
Yeah. But I mean, so there's a way in which meaning, and so prayer is an invocation of participation in higher meaning. That's in one aspect of what prayer is. It's calling upon something which is higher than us, right? And then asking it to act with meaning down on the being. And that it's like, it's a reflect, and it has, I mean, in some ways, it's a reflection also of the care of the people, right? So it's not a cold thing. So if you pray for someone, usually it means that you have some kind of love for them, like you care for them, and that you're going to give attention to them.
Would you believe that prayer would heal people if there was no God? The meaning alone in calling upon, it's the very act of calling upon something higher, even if that higher thing doesn't exist.
That's an interesting question, because the way that I understand it is that it is because of meaning that I believe in God. It is because I see that meaning stacks vertically and moves up towards unity that I believe that there are meanings that transcend me, and therefore, and those meanings are active, like they're not just data, they're agent, like they're agentic, they act down on us. And so for me, the question about meaning and the question about God is the same. It's the same question. So it's a complicated question to answer.
So if there were no God, if you could, I'm watching an amazing show right now that I highly recommend called Dark Matter. Love it. One of the best shows I've seen in years. It plumbs the, I'm telling you, I have no financial association with the show. I'm telling you this for a reason, but it's like a subgenre of science fiction, parallel worlds. Let's say that you were go to a parallel world, and one of those worlds had a god, and the other world didn't have a god. And the world without a god, people are praying. They're calling upon the higher meaning. It's intercessory prayer on behalf of someone else. I don't know, cancer, alcoholism, what have you.
I think this is why, because you don't agree with what a god is. Like the world would not exist without a god. A world can, that if you believe in God.
Well, that's a totally different question. I'm happy to explore that with you. I mean, we can do that right now. Well, why not? And how would you know that?
The way to know it at a lower level, let's say at the start, is to realize that the whole is always more than the sum of its parts. And you see that happen. So you see that every being has a third being. So it's like there's you and I, and then there's a relationship, and that relationship has a kind. I mean, it's in this case it's transient to some extent, but it's also real, right? And so this is true about all groups. Like all groups have something that pops up above it, which becomes an identity, which relates people together, and that identity is causal vertically, right? It binds. It binds that group together.
I'm with you so far, but I don't understand. I'm not
that's a god
in terms of a god.
That's a god. So by the way, I don't that is a god or an angel. Use whatever word you want. It is a active agent that binds multiplicity together into unity. And
so you're not talking about a cosmological thing. You're not talking about Aristotle's prime mover. You're not talking about the Alpha and Omega, the beginning of the universe. Like you're not talking about the Atman, the breath. You're not talking. I mean,
but it all, the hierarchy of gods culminates into the absolute, like it has to, like, because you can see it happen at every level, and at some point, whether or not the absolute, I understand why some people struggle to see the absolute as personal or agentic. I understand why that's part of some philosophies, but there's a sense in which you can see it kind of scale up. That's why all the traditions have these kind of hierarchies of gods, right? It's like you have little gods and bigger gods, and these gods kind of hold other gods.
Yeah, just in Taiwan, I saw it was fascinating.
Something like that. Yeah. So, I mean, for the same reason that we have, like, you see that there's a person, right? There's a multiplicity in me, and I'm held together. And then that I can hold together in a family, and then that family can hold together in a city, and then that city can hold together in a nation. And all those levels have a form of binding, right? And a form of agency, because they command us how to be together, and then that continues to scale. And
I'm with you. I'm with you on the scaling. I'm with you in the binding. I'm with you. So let me just ask, so I can understand. So if a meteor came and killed literally everybody on Earth, would there be a God?
That's a hilarious idea. Like, it's one of those things where if you believe that the world lays itself out in meaning, right, then to just say, well, if something wiped out the meaning making agent of all of reality, would God still exist? Well, like, that's because you don't believe the world functions with meaning. You think it's just arbitrary causes, things bumping into each other. So you imagine a meteorite that hits the Earth and kills all the agentic beings that we know.
Yes.
Because you don't believe that there's actually a story and that there's actually meaning.
So to be consistent.
So it's a wrong, I can't answer that question, because I actually believe the world lays itself out in hierarchies of beings and in hierarchies of stories, that this is how it functions.
No. There's only, to be consistent, there's only one answer to that question for your belief system. To my belief system, there's, I think, two, possibly three. But to yours, you'd have to say that's not possible.
That what's not possible for the meteorite to just hit the Earth randomly.
Yeah. Wouldn't you?
Well, okay. Is it possible? I mean, there's obviously a sense in most traditions and in Christianity too that this world will end. That's part of the story.
Right.
And that but the ending of this world is not the ending of the world, like in the sense that there's a new world that emerges from the end, right?
But not that it's programmed into the telos or subspecies eternitatis at the, under the watchful eye of eternity, these events unfold, but it's just SOL, man. Big meteor, dude, came down from freaking who knows what Alpha Centauri, wherever it comes down, and just like kills everybody. What a bummer that would be. But
yeah, but that's what I mean. What I mean is that
I'll never get my black belt in jiu-jitsu. That's
what I mean is that. Okay, so we could obviously do it at a smaller scale that makes sense, right? Because tragic things do happen. That is definitely true. But I think you're right that I would tend to think that because I believe agency and intelligence are actually an aspect of being, like they're actually an aspect of reality. And I think that humans, at least to our knowledge, right, play a specific role in that cosmos. Like humans seem to be, at least, like I said, as we know, to be the being that is both intelligent and incarnated. Right. And so we have that kind of that place. And so we seem to have an important place in the universe in that sense, because we are the universe knowing itself. We're the universe where we are basically the capacity for being to analyze itself, to know itself, and all of that. And so the idea that just random destruction of all humans, I think you're right that I don't think that can happen.
Okay.
Like, I think that that the end of all things can happen, but I don't think I think that it would play itself out in a story, because I think stories are part of reality.
Yeah. So I'm asking these questions because I'm trying to figure out what you believe, and I'm trying to have it make sense to me. So, and I'm trying to do so, and I'm really sincere when I say this, with a hermeneutic of charity. So, what is your view on the origin of the universe?
Like, what is my view on the
cosmological? Yeah, I mean, do you think God created the whole shebang?
I think that the origin of the universe is in intelligence, and I would say yes. I believe that God created the world.
Oh, okay. Let me ask you a total curveball question. I put this out on. I was thinking about this. I've been thinking about this for a long time.
Okay, so let me just say that one thing that is that I believe that the origin of the universe has to account for the intelligence that it contains.
The origin of the universe has to. So it can't be chance mutations, chance evolutionary mutations that yielded this with some, I don't know, I guess perturbations in the system, but that yielded consciousness as it's currently manifest in humans and animals. It had to be some
whatever chance mutation. Selection is not chance. Selection is the perpetuation of being. So if being has a tendency to perpetuate itself, let's say, then it has certain qualities which are already close to intelligence, like to whatever we think intelligence is. Because autopoiesis is not it's like there's a difference between an autopoietic being and just a rock falling to the ground. Like this is a qualitative difference that has to be. So even if it's chance mutation, the selection process is in no way chance. Selection is always to the perpetuation of being. So selection is so God, like, so you can say that I remember, I think it was Jordan Peterson actually, he was the first one I heard him say that. He said, God is that which selects. And I thought that's a pretty good, that's an interesting idea, at least about the notion of how to help people understand what we mean by God, let's say.
Yeah, in that sense, you mean selecting. So I think it's funny. It's hearkening me back to Being in Time. It's by my Heidegger. I haven't read Heidegger in a long time. Never really sure answered. Actually, my translation test for my master's degrees was in Heidegger. And I'm like, oh no!
They made you translate Heidegger?
Heidegger.
That's crazy.
Anything but Heidegger.
I think they didn't like you. I think they had some disdain towards you.
So that's probably more true than you know. Okay, so so you're using being in that sense as opposed to adaptive organisms. So you're using a kind of philosophical or even theological sense of being as this thing that's revealing itself in the world.
But even the adaptive organism, think about it. Like we take, how did we take for granted, like, that being perpetuates?
Well, let's say that.
Like, why does life fight entropy?
Oh, well, that's a different question. Hold on. Let's go back to your other question.
Well, that's not a different question. It's the exact same question.
Okay.
Like,
okay.
why does being...
Hold on, then I have to shift my consciousness in answering that question. Because this is so many things. I'm trying to limit this.
Yeah. Sorry.
No. You're good. So if you you know, if you could rewind the clock and we evolved slightly differently, and for example, we were kind of appendage bearing. I don't know if you played StarCraft for a long time with the Zerg, these like insectoid creatures that went on, and they were in different bodies. And one claimed to be the Christ, and he resurrected. You wouldn't need humans in their current incarnation, in their current physical forms, right? Like you could have the same intact theology, etc., with beings that look quite different. You're looking at me like that's a
no, but I'm looking at you. I think it's hilarious because you think that the fact that humans, the way they are, became conscious and intelligent is just this arbitrary thing. Like, it could have been something else, but we don't have an example of it being something else. You have no way. You have no way to speculate the idea that insects, in the form of insects with exoskeletons or whatever, could become self-knowing beings in the way that humans are, right? And so, but I want to be careful. I want to be cautious, like, to not sound like I'm just saying anything, right? It's like, you could say, so let me, what it feels like when you're asking me that question, right?
Yeah.
That I say, like, I see a telos, let's say, in
that's
animals.
Exactly what I'm going.
So I see a telos in animals. So I say there are animals that fly, and those animals do not have to be related biologically in order to reach flight. But in order to reach flight, there are certain characteristics that they have to have in order to fly. So if you tell me, well, what if it was a slug, but it became really advanced and then it flew? And I'd be like, well, no, because slugs don't have what it needs to fly. And so if you propose some arbitrary being that has all these characteristics, and you say, well, what if that was the being that became the self-conscious, intelligent being? I'm like, well, whatever. It's like, that's it. To me, it's as irrelevant as saying, what if slugs could fly? Well, if they could fly, they wouldn't be slugs. They would be something else.
I guess
something that would have wings, that have some kind of extension, that it could push against air. Like, it's not like anything can be anything.
Sure. So the purpose of the thought experiment was it was not a roundabout, but it was a way to see if I could figure out without asking you directly. So I'll ask you directly. The telos that you're thinking about, the current, 5 fingers and toes and the way we look with the hair on top of our head and male and female, etc. Although that would be debated recently. So that's
maybe because we got rid of that frame that held everything together.
Yeah, well, I know that's a totally another conversation. That's the substitution. The substitution hypothesis. So So you think that the way we are right now is there's a kind of necessity in that, a biological and evolutionary necessity?
I
And
think to the function, I think so. I think that it's not that there isn't variability. Of course, there's variability, but that variability is limited, right? Just like all the time we talked about variability, is that
yeah.
there's a variability of things that can accomplish something, but it's not indefinite. And so I think that the way that humans, how can I say this? Like this is also why, this is also why the ancient thinking they would see a human as microcosms, right? And that's why they say something like that man is the image of God. Like even the way that man is made, like his part, the fact that he stands straight, the fact that his head is above, the fact like all of these aspects of even the way that human is made is related to is not arbitrary. It has in
It's
some ways
not,
has to
it's,
be within a certain amount of variety to be the case.
well, it's not arbitrary evolutionarily, because if we were subject to different evolutionary pressures, we would look differently. And I guess I'm asking, if we look differently, considerably differently, would the same theological precepts still be operative in your paradigm?
It's like it's funny how I hate these questions because I think it's also because I'm really a realist. Like I'm a realist in the sense that I'm like, why
Yeah.
are you speculating about worlds that don't exist in order to
Oh,
tell me about the world that exists?
I'll tell you exactly why
All
I'm
right,
doing
go
it.
for it.
I'm doing that so I can figure out the limits of the belief and how your beliefs cohere together in some kind of a system. So the purposes of the questions, they're not gotchas, they're not trick questions or anything. They're ways for me to figure. It's kind of like um, um, coherence testing for beliefs, and it
Mhm.
gives me a better idea. It's the other thing is it's a way for me to listen to what you believe, and sometimes if you ask somebody a question, you know, it's people won't give. And I'm not saying you won't do this, but people won't give you a direct answer to the question, and so what you'll have to do is you'll have to tease that out. Like for example, if I said. So the way that we've evolved now to look like we do with five fingers, five toes, is that evolutionarily, is that a necessity? Or if conditions were different, it's pre-advent of, no, I have to be before pre-advent of grain 10,000 years ago. But if conditions were a different, different sun for sort of the
Different sun. That's hilarious. Like this, I mean, I think this is probably again like why I believe the meaning is part of the world. It's like there's a coherence to the way the world is, like the distance of our sun to the earth, all of these things are the fine-tuned whatever reality that makes it possible for us to exist. So if you posit a world with three suns and you think, well, what if we evolved on a world with three suns? Like, well, I would we evolve on a world with three suns? Like, would we evolve in a world that's not exactly
yeah.
the one that we're in?
So the only reason that we can look at these things and say, wow, this is extraordinary, is because if those initial conditions weren't the same, there'd be nobody there to say, wow, this is extraordinary.
Of course.
Right. So, but that doesn't mean. I was at an Indian restaurant many years ago, and the guy didn't speak English that well, and he asked my friend, my buddy Steve. He said, "What is the meaning of meaning?" And I thought that was like such a great question. But in other words, I'm saying that because the sentiment is there. We're looking at the situation in which we find ourselves, and we're saying, "Oh my God, this is miraculous. There's life, etc." Yeah, but you're only saying that because we're only saying that because it's an easy pitfall to fall into. Because if the conditions were different, there'd be no one there to say it.
That's right. There would be no one there to say it.
Yeah, and so
There would also
that's
be no one there to not say it or to
well,
like there'd
that's
be
the
no one there
fallacy of
there'd be
right,
no
but
one there for anything.
right, that's the fallacy of fine tuning, and so then we infer from that that it's been fine tuned. The universe. That's Victor Stenger wrote a great book about that, the fallacy of fine tuning.
Well, we don't, how can I say this? Like we don't like we infer from that it's fine-tuned. How can I say this? Like
Yeah,
we see that meaning and purpose,
yeah,
right, and patterns
yeah,
exist. They don't exist in the same way that things exist, but they exist in the manner in which they bind elements together, right? So we notice, for example, that bats fly and birds fly and butterflies fly and all these things fly. And so now we have a category called flying,
Right.
which is a purpose.
Right.
It is a telos. And so
Right.
you could say something like, well, there is no telos, but if we still recognize it, like the telos is not in the things, the telos is in the way that we recognize it as sharing something in common towards a purpose. And so
yeah, the Telos would be, maybe Telos wouldn't be the right way to look at it, but it would, those were adaptations to enable reproductive success.
but they have a coherence to them.
That's 100%.
Yeah, and they have a coherence that resembles itself across species.
Right. That's why you can say that speech utterance and I understand you.
So you could say that that's an objective pattern that if certain constraints are placed on certain things, then they will yield certain results that bring a being into a certain telos. But it's hard. So what I would say is that telos pre-exists.
Well, I was right up with you toward the end. I was almost going to agree. What do you mean? What do you mean pre-exists?
Well, it pre-exists because it is independent from the multiple instantiations of it. It's independent. It's not dependent on the instantiations, right? Because they are from different species, and therefore they attain something we recognize as a pattern of being, and that pattern of being, it's not dependent on the multiple effects that happen down here. Is it
okay? So I guess I'm unclear. So why, I don't understand where being keeps coming into this. What do you mean by being?
What do I mean by being? In the case of what we're talking about something which perpetuates itself, like especially in terms of biology. Like I think that's a good way of thinking about it, right? Something that's autopoietic and that is agentic, that acts on other things.
So would a mollusk be a being?
I mean, to some extent, it's a lower being, right? That's how it's traditionally understood, is that there is a hierarchy of beings in terms of how let's say agentic they are, and how let's say how conscious also. I mean, there's a relationship between conscious and autopoiesis. It's not exactly the same, but there is a relationship.
Okay. And so now relate that to me so I can understand, and then I have to go. Relate that to me so I can understand the flying thing.
Related to flying thing. So you have a bunch of, so you have a bunch of stuff, right? Right. You have a bunch of,
there are going to be like 10 people on the internet who think this is the greatest conversation ever. And everyone else is going to be like, what are these guys talking about?
Okay. So, all right. So you have a bunch of stuff, right?
Yeah.
And there's a way in which that stuff enters into patterns.
Okay.
Does that make sense? Right. Does that make sense? All right. Okay. Yeah. And so what you notice is that, and those patterns, they kind of cohere multiplicity into one.
Okay.
Does that make sense? All right. So that makes sense.
Because I'm thinking about it in terms of flying now, butterflies, bats, and
so
birds.
So that, what I'm positing is that pattern is an objective reality. It's not objective in the same way that it's objective like math is real. It's real like math is real. It's real like proportions are real. It's real like relationship between, the ordered relationships are real, okay? And it's agentic in the sense that it binds things into it for reasons, for purposes. And so the beings, they come to something that you recognize. You see a pattern, which is called flying, and that pattern is independent from the constituents, because all these different constituents reach the same thing that have nothing to do with each other.
What do you mean independent of the constituents?
What I mean is that there's no biological continuation between, well, I mean, maybe very, very far back, but like there's no biological continuation between a bird and a bat and a butterfly
They
but
were
they fly.
adaptive. Right. They were adaptive and they adapted
They
to.
adapted in a manner that is a type of pattern that you can recognize as having coherence.
Yeah, we totally agree.
Right.
But
So
yeah.
so that is, how can I say this? Like, now take that, right? That type of thinking, and you apply it to groups of people, for example, right?
Okay.
Right. And then you notice that there are agentic patterns that run through groups of people, right?
Okay.
And that those have a type of coherence, and you can recognize it across, right? So you can know what war is because there are people in Papua New Guinea in war, and there are people in America in war, and there are people in China in war, and they're all manifesting a single pattern that is coherent and is agentic because nobody's controlling it. There's no one in the war that is totally
Okay, I am with you. I'm with you.
right?
I'm with you.
Well, that's what a god is, Peter.
Okay, now you lost me.
How did I lose you? So okay. So a good so you have a form of okay. Let me use now more religious language. You have a form of transcendent agency, right? That is coherent and that binds groups of people into behaviors that none of the people control, but that is nonetheless plays itself out with a purpose that nobody can fully hold on to, and that you can recognize across different spheres. And so that's what someone would call the god of war. That is what the ancients call the god of war.
You've really stretched the semantic range
I'm
of
not
God.
semantic range at all. And I'm talking about little gods. Like these are little gods. These are the angels. These are the demons. These are the small agentic beings that we see run through our society, and we see recognize, so we can see that someone is possessed by a certain type of agency and they no longer have control of their being. And so we say they're possessed by a demon.
Okay. So I could, for the purpose of conversation, I could completely adopt the language, the worldview, the structure. I could do that. I can make that little shift. Okay, I got it.
Right. Okay. So now what the difference between that world, right?
Yeah.
So you have a world, let's say a pagan world, where you have multiple agencies. Some of them represent aspects of reality, right? So like desire or war or craftsmanship, and so you see them, and then some actually represent groups of people, right? So it's like we have the local god that is the principality that holds that's the reason why we're a tribe and not just a bunch of strangers, right? So but the problem with these gods, right, is that obviously they don't all want the same thing, and so they fight with each other, right?
Conflicting.
Not only the gods fight with each other, but then the tribes and the groups fight with each other. Okay. And so you see, but it actually has, like, in practice, it's not to say that the religion causes the war, is that the agency that's running through them is in competition with the other. And so you can experience that inside yourself. The same thing, right? So you have lust and you have this other desire, or you have hunger, you have things that you have pride, you have all these things that are running, and you can recognize them across people. So it's like, if I experience lust, I can see that when you experience lust, it seems to be similar. And so I can recognize.
God, I hope not.
I hope not. Hopefully not when we're together, like not when we're looking into each other's eyes.
We're going to have an end of this conversation very soon.
It's like Peter didn't know this is where it was going.
We're going to keep those drinks away from you, baby.
This whole thing is a ploy to seduce you, Peter. That's what you haven't. Okay, so let me just get through it. So you have this world where there, and so then what happens is that at some point you realize that there is something which can bind all of those together. And so maybe we can, to some extent, disagree to what that is, and so we'll say being, we'll say I am, right? So God in the Bible says, I am that I am. So I am being itself. All right. So being itself seems to align all of these different agencies together, or the infinite. So we say God is infinite. God is all this, all knowing, all, like it's just all. And so we can notice that we have to bind all of these multiplicities into a top unity.
Why can't the thing that binds be an evolutionary impulse?
But I don't even know, what do you mean?
The impulse to survive, for example. Why couldn't that be the thing that binds?
So let's say the perpetuation of being. The survive is a weird thing because it's, how can I say this?
Okay. Okay.
Because anyways, let's say the perpetuation of being seems to perpetuate, right? And so I think that that's not a completely bad way of seeing it, and I think that the question is, how can I say this? What makes that the most possible at the most levels on the longest stretch of time? And I think that if you look at the very immediate things, a lot of the kind of simplistic, I think, Darwinian things is usually they look at it at a very short scale. It's like just this one. The reason why I say perpetuation of being is because I'm trying to scale it. I know it's hard for
it doesn't seem to me to be a very parsimonious explanation.
What do you mean?
Well, I mean, you can just, I was kind of thinking adjunct to Occam's razor. Why would you posit anything beyond? It seems like it's orienting itself towards another ontology or another metaphysics or something supernatural when you have naturalistic explanations, given the framework and the paradigm that you've just explicated.
You don't have natural frameworks. And the reason why is because the evolutionary type biologist, and you see that in Dawkins too, because when he gets into the world of memes, he's like, well, I give that up. I'm not going to talk about memes. I'm the one who came up with the term memes, but I don't understand how they function. I don't understand the reason why they're there. I don't understand how they bind reality together. I don't understand how they perpetuate being. I don't understand any of that stuff. And so you have this problem because humans don't also, beings that are higher than us also try to perpetuate themselves.
What do you mean?
Nations are autopoetic. Nations are agentic. Nations try to defend themselves from other beings. They act analogously to beings at a lower level. They act like big cells. And so
I never think about Heidegger, but isn't being only found in beings?
Is what?
Isn't being only found in beings?
Well, it's found incarnated, you could say, in beings, but it nonetheless calls, right? It calls towards something, right? It calls towards unity is maybe the way to think about it.
So I guess at an individual atomic level, I can atomistic level would be a better way to think about it. I can use the beings. It gets more difficult for me, and maybe it's just a lack of my imagination.
Peter, the reason why this is important is because you have no way of accounting for religion. Religion is a universal thing that is there in every culture from the beginning of time until very recently. And you don't have a way to account for it except to say that it's something bad that we should kind of get rid of, and it's kind of silly.
I don't think we should get rid of that.
I mean is that this is the problem, because there are modes of unifying beings together that transcend the individual level. And if you don't have a system that accounts for it, then you say religion's a mind virus or whatever type of thing that a lot of I'm not saying you said that, but let's say
faith. It was faith.
Yeah, so it's like that it's a mind virus. Yeah. And you think, okay, that means that you can't see the analogy between, let's say, a religious service and a religious procession and the cohesion of cells together in an organ, and how there's a way in which they come together, the multiplicity moves into.
Yeah. So just to be clear with my sense, then I really do have to go out.
Yeah, right.
Just to be clear with my sense, I was very explicit in my work and my writing that religion is not the problem. Religion, in fact, I couldn't be more clear. Religion is community. Religion is people coming together. Religion is a lot of positive aspects. My problem has always, from day one, been the epistemological claims, the truth claims, the And again, I never think about this stuff anymore. It's just totally irrelevant given the civilizational threats we're currently facing. I think we both agree on those. So I do see the socially salubrious effects of religion and community, to be sure. And I guess the question would be, if a flawed epistemology led to the moral flourishing of society, should people adopt the flawed epistemology? All right, I have to go.
All right. It was good. We could set up another meeting, but this was.
Let's do another one, man.
I
Let's
enjoyed
do
it.
another one.
I enjoy it. All right, it's good to see you.
Good. I had a good time. Thanks, Jonathan.
Thanks. All
Thank
right,
you.
bye.
Pretty good fun.